And let's talk about what just transpired. I want to bring back in our panel, politics editor at TheRoot.com and professor of politics and journalism at Morgan State University, Jason Johnson. Columnist for the Daily Beast and Roll Call, Patricia Murphy is here, and CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Laura Coates, and George Terwilliger, who served as the acting attorney general under George H.W. Bush. And George, thanks for sticking around, because I appreciate your being here. I want to start with what Paul Ryan said about Donald Trump's temporary immigration ban. He said the rollout was confusing, but I guess in the end, Jason, he supports it.
Of course he does, because the Republicans are pretty much going to support anything that Donald Trump says. This is the issue that I have with it from a legal and a moral and a political standpoint. I have said this repeatedly. We've had more Americans killed since 9/11 by white nationalists and domestic terrorists than anything from any jihadi from any part of the world. So for him to suggest that this policy, that the only problem is the rollout and the rhetoric around it, is not the issue. The issue is that there's no evidence that blocking visas and preventing people from coming from these countries keeps us any safer. We should have the focus on here in the United States and dangerous people here, and that's not the concern. This is a racist and dangerous policy promoted by Paul Ryan and the President of the United States.
So George, I want you to answer to that, because you were a former Deputy Attorney General. What do you think?
This is a very intelligent pause in a policy that's designed to ensure the security and safety of our citizens. Look, for years during the Cold War, we had different criteria for the entry of people from Soviet bloc countries because of a number of different fears, including espionage. To take time out here, all the histrionics and what we just heard, in fact, the rhetoric about this, that all we're simply doing is taking time out to put into effect new screening methodologies to ensure that when we go through a refugee program, when we let people in from countries with a history of terrorist violence, we're making sure that the people who come here are coming here for the right reasons, to assimilate and become part of our culture. That's an entirely logical, appropriate, and legal thing to do.
And of course, Laura, Democrats have completely the opposite opinion. In fact, there are 11 lawsuits, I think, that have now been filed against Mr. Trump's executive orders. So what do you suppose will happen in the end?
Well, you know, ironically, the same message that Ryan has been spouting and everyone else who's in support of the firing of Sally Yates is about an intelligent pause and waiting to figure out the clarity that you need to enforce it in a uniform and systematic and lawful way. And in fact, that is the role of the Department of Justice, to be able to understand the breadth of an order and figure out whether or not they can enforce it uniformly. You know, you misconceive the notion that the Department of Justice is somebody who the President of the United States says, here is my directive, now figure out a way to make this lawful and legal. That's actually the opposite theory of the DOJ. In fact, their role is supposed to figure out how they can enforce any lawful order. But if there are questions about whether or not it's ambiguous as to its lawfulness, let alone its constitutionality, the DOJ and any attorney general, whether it be the acting or the one who is probably going to be seated, Jeff Sessions, they will have the same conundrum. Which aspects can be enforced in conformity with the Constitution and in conformity with what we know about the Immigration and National Act?
And Patricia, I don't know if you heard.
It is just,
wait a minute, George, go ahead.
That statement is just wrong. I'm sorry, that statement is just wrong. The role, what Sally Yates did was an affront to the institution of the Department of Justice and the career men and women who work there. You don't defy a presidential directive.
Well, sir, I have been a career attorney for the Department of Justice.
Please?
You certainly can.
May I finish, please? I'm sorry. You don't defy a presidential directive and order subordinates to abandon their duty to go into court in an adversary system and represent the interests of the United States. The real hero here is Dana Bente, another career employee of the Justice Department who has stepped up to this task.
Well, sir, as a career attorney, I actually believe that the president does have the prerogative to lay off or fire Sally Yates if she does not follow his other directives. However, this always presumes one really critical component. that they have a duty to follow lawful orders. And the arguments that you're using as if that she has betrayed the Department of Justice or her authority is actually inaccurate. What she has done instead is simply said that
I got to
she needs
interrupt
to have
this.
it lawful.
I got to interrupt this debate for just a second because